Hello folks, my name is Kevin. Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to talk about the moral argument. Up to this point, I have presented in previous videos two scientific arguments for the existence of God. And in this one, I want to present a philosophical argument for God's existence that is based on or surrounding the subject of morality. And in my opinion, of the main arguments for God's existence, I really do think the moral argument is the most compelling for most people. And that's not to say that the other arguments aren't compelling. They are. I think they're good arguments. But in this particular case, I think the moral argument is the most compelling because it resonates with people the most. I mean, generally speaking, as we look around and observe the world around us, it's incredibly obvious that there is something deeply wrong with the world in terms of human behavior. It's clear that humanity has gone astray, and there's wickedness in the world that needs to be dealt with. And I think the moral argument helps lay a foundation for not only making sense of the evil in the world, but it also shows that evil constitutes some of the best evidence for God's existence, and that morality can only be grounded in God. That's the goal of the argument here. And I really think it's a very compelling argument, and I'm just excited to share it with you guys here. So the first premise of the moral argument says that if God does not exist, then there can be no objective moral values and duties. Premise 2, there are objective moral values and duties. Conclusion, God exists. So when talking about this argument, I think I want to start by addressing the second premise first. Premise 2 states again that there are objective moral values and duties. So what do I mean by that? Well, an objective moral values are basically moral principles that transcend people, time, and culture. Examples of this would be murder, rape, and torturing little children just for fun. And a moral duty is basically our obligation to do the right thing and abstain from doing the wrong thing. And I'm contending that there are objective moral values and duties. We have an objective responsibility to do what is right and abstain from what is evil. So if someone is going to deny premise 2, then I think they bear the burden of explaining when it's okay to torture little children just for fun. And there are a wide range of objective moral principles out there, but I think we only really need one to defend that premise 2 is true. Again, if someone's going to deny premise 2, then they need to explain when it's okay to torture little children just for fun. And if they can't do that, and they recognize then that it's always wrong to torture little children just for fun, then that defends that there is at least one objective moral value and duty, and therefore premise 2 is true. But there are other examples, like it's wrong to murder, it's wrong to rape, it's wrong to mistreat others for, just for the heck of it. So I think people recognize that morality is objective, even though some of them may give lip service to moral relativism. And I've addressed relativism a little bit in my previous videos, but moral relativism in particular is the view that there is no objective or absolute standard of morality, that any behavior goes, that people can just decide for themselves what is right and wrong for them. And that kind of thinking I don't think works. I think it's an incredibly flawed philosophical view, and I don't think people who hold to relativism can actually live by it consistently. So if relativism is true, and if morality is relative to each individual, then Ted Bundy was not wrong to rape and murder women, because in order to say that he was wrong would require an objective standard of morality above him to justify the claim. So if moral relativism really is true, then we have no basis to criticize any moral behavior whatsoever. Because if each individual decides for themselves what is right and wrong, and if it's relative to them, then on what basis can I claim that someone else's moral behavior is wrong? Says who? It's just my opinion against theirs. And the same thing would apply to Hitler. Why was Hitler wrong to murder and liquidate 6 million Jews if morality is relative to the individual? And if it's relative to the society, the same problem is still there. On what basis can we claim that one society is wrong in their behavior if morality is relative to them and they decide for themselves what is right and wrong? So I don't think relativism works, and I also don't think people who hold to moral relativism can live consistently with their own relativism. I mean, a lot of people that I've talked to who claim to be moral relativists on the one hand, also on the other hand, criticize things in our society and culture. I had a professor in college who claimed to be a moral relativist, but she also at the same time claimed to be a feminist. So feminism, at least modern day feminism, um, assumes that it's wrong to oppress and mistreat women. But how can it be wrong to oppress and mistreat women in any objective sense if relativism is true? So she's inconsistent with her own worldview. If she really was a moral relativist, then she should have absolutely no problem with women being oppressed. So if you're ever talking with someone who claims to be a moral relativist, I think if I would recommend filing away in the back of your mind that they hold to be a relativist, and then later on another day when the subject isn't being discussed, I would just ask them like, hey, can I just see $20? Can I borrow $20 from you? And then once they give you a $20 bill, just rip it in front of them, or just put it in your pocket and walk away and pretend that you never took the money from them. Or if you're willing to buy them a new phone, ask them if you can see their cell phone for something, and then smash it on the ground in front of them. They're going to respond as if you did something wrong. If you were to hit somebody in the face for no reason, they're going to respond as if you did something wrong. So I really don't think that moral relativists can live consistently with their own worldview. So regarding premise 2, that there are objective moral values and duties, I think the premise is self-evidently true. We all recognize objective morality in our daily lives. We recognize that it's wrong to murder, it's wrong to rape, it's wrong to steal things from people, and it's wrong to torture little children just for fun. Again, if the person that you're presenting this argument to is going to deny premise 2, then you should ask them to explain when it's okay to torture little children just for fun, and I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So that gives us back to premise 1. Since we know that objective moral values and duties do exist, the question then becomes, where does our objective standard of morality come from? I contend that it comes from God, but there are other options on the table that are worth discussing. So I really think those options come down to 4: individuals, society, evolution, and God. And I've kind of already talked about the individual and society options, but I'll just emphasize that a little bit more here. If individuals and society determine objective morality, then that's really a contradiction in terms, because if objective morality was established by individuals and society, then they couldn't be objective because they don't transcend individuals and societies. Remember earlier I stated that in order for a moral value to be objective, it has to be true independent of individual opinion, and it has to transcend time and culture and society. So if someone were to try to ground objective morality in the individual and societies, then that would just be a contradiction in terms. But more than that, as I was alluded to earlier, there's further problems with the notion that individuals and society set the moral standard. Because again, if individuals determine what is objectively right and wrong, then how are we to resolve moral disputes between two individuals? If one person like Ted Bundy says it's okay to rape and murder women, then on what basis can you or I tell him that he's wrong to do that if he is the standard of morality? If he creates his own standard, then we have no basis to claim that he's wrong. In order to claim that one individual's moral behaviors is wrong and another's is right, requires a standard, an objective standard of morality above the individual in order to compare their behaviors to. And I think the same rule applies to society. If society sets the moral rules, then how do we adjudicate moral conflicts between two or more societies? I mean, Nazi Germany was a society, and they hated the Jews and thought it was okay to murder them. Ancient China is a society, and I think even China beyond ancient China practiced imprisoning Christians and killing them. So, China was once a society that did this. Middle Eastern societies mistreat women, they behead homosexuals, and the Democrat South in the United States, prior to the Civil War, practiced slavery. So you have all these different societies with conflicting moral practices. If society sets the moral rules, then how do we determine which society has it right and which one has it wrong? There'd be no way to do that because such a discussion requires an objective standard of morality above society that we can compare their actions to. So some people might respond to that by saying, well, it just matters whatever society wants to practice, that's what they go with, and that's what's right and wrong for them. But if that's true, then it's not possible to have moral reform within a society, because in order to claim that your own society is doing something wrong requires a standard of morality above your own society to justify the claim. I mean, a lot of people today claim that the United States is a racist society. We stole land from the Indians and all those things, and that we're just a wicked, evil society. But if society sets the moral rules and is the standard of morality, then on what basis can they claim that the United States is wrong to do that? I don't agree with them that the United States is a racist society, and I don't agree with them that the United States bears the blame for violating treaties with the Indians, and that goes beyond the point of this video. I'm just trying to highlight that even if those things were true, on what basis can they claim that it's wrong? If our society is racist, then that can't be wrong if they set the moral rules. So hopefully that shows that the individual and society are not adequate options for grounding objective moral values and duties. So what about evolution? Some people like Sam Harris have posited that objective moral values and duties basically came about from an evolutionary means of survival, that humanity had to recognize certain moral principles in order to survive, and that morality can be grounded in our evolutionary need to flourish as a species. And I think there's a number of problems with this view. Number one is it presupposes that human flourishing is objectively good in the first place. Says who if there is no God? Why is it good for humanity to flourish and not some other species if there is no God? So I really think that this alternative is question begging by assuming human flourishing to be objectively good in the first place. If there is no God, then why is it objectively good for mankind to survive as opposed to some other species? It seems to me that if there is no God, then the human race is no more significant than some other species, or any other species out there for that matter. In order to place us at the top of the totem pole in terms of value, seems to me that would require God in order to justify that, because without him, then it's just question begging. Sam Harris and other atheists have also argued that if something causes pain and suffering to another, then it's wrong. But that presupposes that pain and suffering is objectively wrong in the first place. Says who? We may not like pain and suffering, but that's just a preference. How can we claim in any objective sense that those things are actually wrong if there is no God? So I really hope that shows that the evolution alternative is question begging. It assumes things and steals ideas from God that it can't justify if there is no God. It assumes that humanity is intrinsically valuable, that our flourishing is objectively good. And I do agree that humanity is intrinsically valuable and that it's important for us to flourish. But I justify that claim by grounding it in God. We're made in his image. He's the creator and sustainer of the universe. He created us, and he's the objective source of morality, is my view. So if you take God out of the equation, then you're just question begging and assuming those things to be true without any way of grounding the notion of human flourishing, that pain and suffering are wrong. They're stealing those ideas from God when they offer evolution as the grounding for objective moral values and duties. There's more wrong with the evolution alternative that I want to lay on the table here. If objective moral values and duties came about from an evolutionary need to survive, then we would have to conclude that slavery is not wrong because virtually every ancient society practiced it, or at least most of them did. So apparently they saw slavery as necessary for human survival and flourishing. So I think that's a big problem with the evolution alternative. In addition to that, if objective morality came about from evolution, then why is it that so many cultures and societies have conflicting moral practices that can't both be correct or true at the same time? I mean, if it were true that objective morality came about from evolution, then we would expect all humanity to be on the exact same page on moral practices and behaviors. Yet we're not. So that seems to suggest that maybe some societies evolve differently than others. And if that's the case, then it's impossible to adjudicate moral conflicts between societies, because who are we to say that one society evolved incorrectly and another one evolved correctly without an objective standard to refer to justify the claim? So I think that's a problem that with the evolution alternative. Lastly, another problem with the evolution alternative is it fails to explain how humanity survived if we needed moral behaviors, where in contrast with other animals that don't have a sense of morality. How is it that they survived without coming up with some moral standard to practice with? I mean, consider lions. When a lion or a tiger kills a zebra, it kills the zebra, but it doesn't murder the zebra. When a whale copulates with a female, it copulates with her, but it doesn't rape her. So morality doesn't seem to really exist with any other species on the planet except humanity. So what I'm trying to draw out here is, how is it that all of those species survived without a moral code to adhere to, but humanity needed a moral code in order to survive? I think that's a conflict that, or a problem that the evolution alternative can't seem to explain or reconcile. So if it's true that humanity had to develop certain moral practices in order to survive, then why on evolution is it wrong to rape? I mean, humanity needs to procreate, so why would it be wrong for males to forcibly have sex with females in order to procreate and ensure the survival of our race? Why is that wrong on evolution? Because animals do that all the time. They have sex with each other. They don't get consent, and they procreate that way. And yet we don't call that rape and say that it's wrong. So why is it wrong for us but not wrong for the rest of the animal kingdom? So I really think that is a problem, that all these other animals survived without a moral code, but apparently humanity needs a moral code in order to survive. So hopefully that helps make sense of why I don't think the evolution option is reasonable for grounding objective moral values and duties. So that leaves us with one alternative: God. Now, when I offer this alternative, there's a very famous dilemma that's been resolved. Like, a number of Christian apologists and philosophers have resolved this apparent dilemma, so I'm kind of surprised to hear it echoed in the chambers of internet atheists as often as I do. But some people ask the question, is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it's good? And this is known as the Earthworld dilemma. So the dilemma is that if something is good because God commands it, then anything God commands would be good, and it would just be arbitrary. God could command rape, and then that would become good. And then on the other side of the coin, if God commands something because it's good, then that means that there's a standard of morality above God, and he isn't necessary for grounding morality. But as many Christian philosophers has already shown in the past, this is a false dilemma, because there's a third alternative that's not being considered by people who offer this dilemma. Namely, is that God commands something out of an expression of his own character. What he commands is good because it comes from his own moral character, and it's impossible for God to violate his own moral character. So that's the third alternative here that really resolves this false dilemma. And that's the view that I have. I hold the view that objective moral values and duties are grounded in God's character, and the commands that he gives are expressions of his own character. So back to the moral argument, from our alternatives of the individual, society, evolution, and God, the first three don't work, and that leaves us with God as the only adequate foundation for objective moral values and duties. So the conclusion that God exists is necessarily true. And I want to go back to, so you can see the whole argument here, the both premises and conclusion at the same time. Let's just go through it one more time. If God does not exist, then there can be no objective moral values and duties. But there are objective moral values and duties. Therefore, God exists. Each premise is true. The logical move from the premises to the conclusion is valid. Therefore, the conclusion that God exists is necessarily true. And if you remember in my first video on the cosmological argument, when I explained what a deductive argument is, I explained that if the premises are true and if the logical move between them and to the conclusion is valid, then the conclusion is necessarily true whether we like it or not. So as long as it's true that there are objective moral values and duties in the world, which it is, then it logically follows that those objective moral values and duties can only be grounded in God. So let me just go through here and one other thing. Yeah, this reminds me. One other thing I want to clarify here is a lot of atheists, when they hear this argument, they respond they respond to a straw man. They basically say like, oh, well, atheists can behave morally. This argument is not claiming that atheists cannot behave morally. They absolutely can. It's simply explaining that they cannot ground morality. They can't justify why something is right or wrong without God. So moral epistemology has to do with how we come to know something. And moral ontology, in the case of morality, moral epistemology has to do with how we come to know what certain moral values are. Epistemology is the study of how we come to know things, and ontology is the study of what those things are. So moral ontology has to do with what objective morality consists of and how we ground and justify the categories of good and evil. So atheists, again, can behave morally, moral epistemology, but they cannot ground or justify morality. They cannot provide an ontological basis for the categories of good and evil, nor can they justify what behaviors they put in those two categories. So atheists have a grounding problem. They cannot explain the basis for objective moral values and duties that they live by. And that is a huge point I'm trying to make with this argument. So at this point, I've kind of noticed that the video's gotten a little long, so I think I'm going to stop it here, and I'm going to address the problem of evil in the next video.